Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Games Tavern Happy Hour. I'm Mac, and I'm joined today with Rob, and we're going to be discussing some interesting topics, sort of a continuing of our Tips for Players series. We've done a lot of episodes recently talking about tips for games masters and dungeon masters and the guys on that side of the dungeon master screen. This time we're coming back to talking about tips for the players on the player side of the table. This time we're trying to focus it more on the you've been playing for a few years kind of group. You kind of the grizzled veterans, you know what's going on, you're no longer having to learn the rules. You should have this down. So, yeah, sorry about that, guys. We were hoping for someone else better. So one of the big things that this has the most bullet points underneath it for what we're talking about is for the past few episodes and sort of in the roleplay zeitgeist around there. One of the big things that we need to be paying attention to and we're trying to stamp down is the idea of metagaming. You as a player know a whole lot of things that your characters don't. Hey, Rob, we're getting a can't hear you. Can you go ahead and give me a sound check there? Yes. Hang on one second. Let me play around with that for a minute. Sorry about that, guys. We're trying a new setup here. How about now? Rob, what do you got?
Hey, can you guys hear me now?
That looks better on my side. Okay. I'm seeing your bar moving there back and forth. Yay! All right.
Yep. There we go. Cool.
Rabbit's happy about that. Thanks, guys. I was going to miss that and just be monologuing the entire time. So, yeah, we were talking about metagaming. The general consensus, the commandment for role-playing games is don't do that. Make sure that you separate a clear, bright line between what you know and what your character knows. When you become one of the more experienced players at the table, it's a little bit worth thinking about that a little bit differently. And this falls broadly under the category that I like to call constructive metagaming. The most blatant version and the most easily accessible version of talking about that is if the GM, sends out a plot hook, you should probably try and follow that plot hook. While it might not make too much sense for your personal character or for any of the very specific things, if you see the flashing neon light that says "adventure this way," think about following that. Especially if you don't know if you know you're the veteran at the table.
So this comes down to like the limited exceptions to rules when we talk about you should not metagame. When you're the veteran player, there are moments at which you may actually need to step in and metagame because you do know, for instance, that whatever's going on in the scene is your DM going, here's your prepared adventure. This is what I've got ready for you. Please follow this. Or at least this is what I'm ready for you guys to go through. Consider this, because otherwise we're going to wander around in a circle. Which again is a totally valid thing to do as a group, and if you decide for whatever reason your character would not grab that hook, for instance, like, hey, we need you to go steal this thing from this noble, and you're playing a paladin, got it, don't worry about it, your character is not going to be the one who presses for that, and that'll be on the DM to figure out how to get back around to that particular plot point and get one of the characters who can engage with it interested in it. But I will say, we're talking about limited exceptions. One of the big ones is if your group comes into an encounter that you, as a veteran player, know that your group has no chance of surviving if they actually stay and fight, your character should probably recommend that they run away. Yes, that is 100% metagaming. But it is also a great way to save your party from a total party kill and to save all the rage and angst that goes with losing a character. Especially if you got a bunch of new players with you who don't know that a young red dragon is not an appropriate encounter for a level 3 group.
Yeah, there is a lot of stuff that gets tied into that. So it's very hard to come up with very specific examples because it's difficult. You don't want to be suffering from I know how this works and how that doesn't. One of the biggest things there is trolls. Every veteran player around the world knows that trolls are weak to fire. We all know that. it's very key, and I don't want to deprive any of the new players from experiencing that, oh, trolls are weak to fire and they're going to keep regenerating. If I have a feeling that the new kid at the table, that this is their first encounter with troll, I'm sitting back. I'm gonna stick with the lightning spells or the regular blade or whatever it's gonna do. That's not gonna tip into its weakness, and then they get to figure out what the problem is. Why does this thing keep coming back?
Right. You have to also make a justified decision for your character. So, somebody asked me why did Rafe use the acid-based chromatic orb on that troll? And I said, well, the thought process was this: Rafe had already tried ice knife. He had already tried guiding bolt. Neither had worked. Just through luck of the rolls, he hadn't hit with them. And his go-to normally is cold. Cold, ice, or water are the elements that he is most familiar with. But in this situation, at that point in combat, he had also seen that what they were doing was not really getting the job done. And as a priest of Gond, he is very familiar with acid and what acid is capable of. So I made the decision that Rafe would probably use acid in this situation. And using acid, of course, has a lot of collateral damage possibilities.
Yeah.
The smart decision would have been to use fire, but that's not the decision that would have been natural to Rafe. And in fact, I don't think Rafe would ever use fire for anything.
No, that doesn't seem like his style.
Right, exactly. It's not his style. So.
Yeah, that's so. Dire Rabbit actually just asked there if all my characters are pyros. No, they're not. I'm not even confident I'd say that that Adgern is, but hey, whatever. It is what it is. Anyway, so yeah, that's being able to not deprive people of that while still having a good storytelling experience is honestly a difficult skill. Being able to get out there and be like, all right, I know that the troll is weak to fire, and I could end this in 2 rounds. Okay, I'm not going to do that because there are other players, or I can end this in a handful of rounds. So I know there are other players there. I don't want to step on their toes, and I want to give them the experience that's everybody loves the first time that they encounter a troll, because that's an important time in in a player's development.
Right, and we're fortunate because. This was not the first time that Anna, as a player, who was a new player, relatively speaking, had encountered a troll. And she had gotten to enjoy the utter panic of fighting a troll with a group that doesn't have access to fire spells or doesn't know that they're supposed to use fire spells against trolls in character or out of character. So, in that situation, everybody had experienced trolls before. Nobody was missing out on that moment of crap, we keep trying to kill this thing and it just won't die. Why?
Yeah, and that's a fun thing to experience with trolls until it becomes frustrating until you realize no one has any fire around.
Well, that's never strictly true if your DM has prepared correctly. For instance, the first time that we encountered trolls as the WMD group, it was in the middle of a thunderstorm. So if for whatever reason, Adgern did get knocked out, and our primary fire guy was out of action. I'm willing to bet that Reed would have allowed us to pick up a burning piece of wood and use that.
Yeah, that's an important thing to figure. Although I don't know how we would have figured out that. Although no, we all should know that because we're all sort of experienced adventurers at that point.
Yes. The only person that didn't know, and that again, this comes down to Rafe being Rafe, is Rafe.
Yeah. And people generally have to. Yes, Ninja, that is true. People usually have tinderboxes. I don't know the mechanics for using that in combat. I think you'd basically have to have downed the troll and then tried to light it on fire with.
You're basically taking an action to light something on fire, and then you're trying to light the troll on fire.
Yeah, you basically just build a campfire on top of a dying troll. So
yeah,
that's a fun one. So with the constructive metagaming, there's a couple other points on there. It's talking to your GM, making sure that just an average Tuesday. It's talking to your GM, making sure that they're aware of different things. This may or may not actually qualify as metagaming. but you want them to be aware of how your character interacts with the world, how your character's mind view is, especially if you're going to be hardcore trying to, you lean more into the this is the way my character would do it, so I'm going to be more or less inflexible on that. And that's a perfectly fine way to roleplay on that. But being able to say, hey, these are hard points for my character that they won't violate. How do we work together as a team to get past this and continue on with the story? Preferably having this conversation away from the table, not during game time, but a before or after kind of session kind of thing. Give your GM a little bit of time to prepare. But being out there and knowing to talk to your other characters, talk to your player or to your GM, just so that they know, so they try to avoid putting you into the situation where you have to metagame, where you have to figure out an alternative solution that may or may not actually fit with what's going on there. Speaking with your players or speaking with your GM is a huge thing, period. It's one of the biggest things you can do. And especially if you're planning on doing something weird. Let them know that. Here we go. Fantastic. Dire Rabbit's asking us if there's any advice for veteran players with a newbie DM. Rob, what do you think?
Yes. Be gentle. It is very, very easy as an experienced player to take a newbie GM's game right off the rails, and at that point they're relying strictly on their improbabilities, and they probably don't have very deep improbabilities.
Yeah, improv is a hard skill to build.
Very gentle. Yeah. Please, if you can see the rails, follow the rails.
Yeah, if someone says, hey, this is my first time running, or it's my first time running in a while, or I've only run once or twice before, okay, you know what, hey, you see something that looks like adventure is that way. If it's someone's first time running, there's probably not red herrings. There's probably not, a bunch of various ways to do the subterfuge to get to this end goal. It's probably going to be a pretty linear adventure, so know what it is you're doing. When you walk into shops, know what it is you're looking for. When you interact with NPCs or you talk to the inn, know what it is that you're doing. Don't try to be overly subtle or ask weird roundabout questions, because your GM probably isn't prepared to answer those.
Mm-hmm. The other big one I would say is probably don't correct your DM during the game. If you see issues that they're going to need to address if they want to improve as a DM, write them down. That is the best way to go about it. Write them down and say, hey, I saw some things that I think you need to improve on. Would you like me to give you a list, or would you like to talk about it?
I would actually extend that beyond being playing with a new DM. If you're playing with any DM and they say, hey, this is what happens here, you're like, well, the rule book says that this thing works. Don't be that guy at the table. You've been playing for a while. You should know the rules, at least as much as they pertain to your character and all that, far better than any of the other variety of rules.
It is especially important with a new DM, though.
Yes. Yeah, you don't want to... we all remember the first time that we all DM'd or played a game, period, and if someone were to come out and immediately rain on that parade, probably turn you off from the game entirely. Like, you don't want to be doing that. We'll get to this in a bit, but as veteran players, you really want to sort of build a welcoming atmosphere for the newer people. Otherwise, the hobby dies. Surprise.
Well, it doesn't grow. This one doesn't seem likely to die anytime soon. True. Fortunately.
Yeah, very, very true.
I think I want to talk about that last one. May I?
Yeah. Let's dive into that.
Yeah. So, Mac and I were discussing this earlier. We were talking about min-maxing. And min-maxing is something that every player does, and it is not a bad thing per se. But when you are the veteran player at a table, especially with a new group and especially with a new DM, min-maxing a character build is one of the worst things you can do. One, it takes opportunities away from your new DM, and two, it sets a really bad example for the other new players.
Yep. Yeah, I remember the last Pathfinder campaign that I was in, and this was Pathfinder 1, so it built itself very well for this. Someone sat down, most of my party actually sat down, and was like, all right, this is how my level progression is going to go. Okay, regardless of anything that's coming up with it story-wise or anything. It's like, no, we can sit down. We know exactly how many experience points we're going to get, how many blah, blah, blah. I know exactly what spells, skills, feats, etc. I'm going to build in to make this happen. And they had their character built from level 1 to level 10, and when it was time to upgrade, they just swapped sheets. That's kind of min-maxy, the way that I see that, because you're not building a organic, a growing character more often than not when that happens.
There are two sides to that. One is that when you are building a character on archetype, is if you establish an archetype for that character from go, and you're going to follow that all the way to the end, that is a valid way to approach games.
Sure.
It is probably not the best way, but if the group is going in with the expectation that everyone is playing firmly on an archetype and understands what the basic progression for that archetype is, sure, my character's playing Robin Hood, my character's playing Little John. Got it. We understand where that's going.
Yeah. A lot of this actually does boil down to that point there where speak with your players, or speak with the other players, speak with the DM. Open communication between everybody at the table is going to make everything at the table much smoother. Dire Rabbit actually just kicked in with a good point there. The DM in her work game as a newbie gives players inspiration if they correct her in a way that makes the situation less advantage for the character / party.
That's a great way to use inspiration.
Yeah.
Flat out, period.
It's like, hey, I don't know if you're aware of this, but you get advantage to attack us on this round, or mimics, or this thing or that. I mean, whatever it is you want to do. Yeah.
That's also a give and take mechanic like that is present in a lot of modern tabletop games, because players who are experienced, for example, understand how to min-max a situation. Beyond just min-maxing a character, they can min-max a situation. So if you hand them a mechanic that says, hey, if you let me take advantage of this situation as the DM, in a later situation, you're going to have an advantage. Are you willing to do that? Are you willing to trade here? Because I have something interesting that I want to do, but it requires your character to make a mistake or to fail completely.
Yeah.
In a way that doesn't necessarily help move things forward. But trust me, there's something coming at the end of this that will make it worth it. Plus, you get this token that you can use for advantage.
Yeah, being able to actually reward the players when they do something is kind of cool. And that's a great way to get that going. So if we have and a lot of this is sort of dancing around one of the topics that we're going to go in, but when you are the grizzled veteran player of your group, by definition, you're going to be playing with a whole lot of newer players with less experience than you. And being able to play well with them is very, very important. I know, unfortunately, there is sort of the stereotype, I guess, or the trope almost, of the guy at the back of the comic book shop who plays Dungeons and Dragons and is just railroads, does his thing, and it's like, no, I always play this character and do this thing and do that. That's an uninviting way to be.
You can say it. You can 100% say that neckbeard or grognard.
I was going to avoid that, but yeah.
Those are valid terms, and they are stereotypes because they are true.
Yeah.
And I have friends who are 100% grognards, and I don't blame them because they remember what it was like when they were playing AD&D or 3rd edition, not 3.5, mind you, 3rd edition.
Strict 3rd. Yeah.
And that's the game that they want to reconnect with, that they want to re-experience it. Of course, it's rose-colored glasses. Things lined up, everything went well. It was a campaign that had inspired characters and inspired choices and inspired DMing, and everything went. You can't count on that ever happening again. And I guess that's a tip for veteran players, is that not every campaign that you participate in is going to be the one that you necessarily want to be playing in, because you're going to have memories of that one campaign. And maybe it's your white whale. Maybe that campaign got away from you and you never got to finish it, and that stinks. Trust me, I understand how that feels. But trying to turn other campaigns into that campaign, also not a great idea. You're never going to get there.
Yeah, you don't want to turn into that guy who's chasing down your adventures of the past. We just got a real quick Fang69872. Thank you so much for subscribing. We we can't do this without you guys. Feel free to join in that conversation and ask your questions in the chat, and we'll try and address them.
Welcome and thank you, Fang.
Yeah, thank you so much. With that exact problem there of trying to rebuild a campaign that you had or dig into that, yeah, that's an issue. And you don't want to fall if you don't check yourself, you don't find these, you don't self-aware enough to try and correct your path, you run the risk of becoming the neckbeard grognard sitting in the back of the comic book shop trying to relive that one really great campaign.
It's an interesting balance point because on one hand, yes, it's great to have goals. But on the other hand, if you have goals that aren't really achievable, all you're going to do is drive yourself crazy.
Yep. So it's one of the best ways I have a good way to try and shake that up is I personally try to avoid playing the same archetype multiple campaigns in a row. I know a lot of people out there are like, oh, I always play a rogue, I always play a ranger, I always play a paladin. That's the character archetype I feel really good in. And cool, if that's what you want to do, have a party. I try to avoid that just to keep every experience fresh and wild and something that I'm not sure. It also means I need to learn new rules every single time because I don't switch campaigns enough to keep up with the edition creep.
Yeah. No, you're 100% right. Challenging yourself, moving outside of your comfortable role is a great way to re-engage with the game. Prim and I traded our primary roles in a party. Prim is usually the blaster, the sorcerer, the warlock, and I typically play either a fighter or a paladin up front getting hit in the face. But I made a conscious decision, and when we asked her to play, she made a conscious decision to basically switch roles. And Zatara is the face fighter who punches the people and hits them with swords. And I'm playing a character who does not want to be involved in combat at all. And these are moves away from our quote unquote comfort zones, but we're both very experienced players, capable of playing the whole spectrum of archetypes. But this is away from what's normal. And in fact, when I told Reed, hey, I don't want to play the tank this time, Reed was like, are you sure? Because he knows I get kind of frustrated when somebody is not tanking correctly, is not correctly playing that kind of character archetype. But at the same time, with an experienced group that knows how to cover down, you're not going to have that problem. So having an inexperienced fighter, for instance, is not a big deal when you also have an experienced cleric or an experienced wizard playing, because they know how to manage the battlefield. That's really a big thing as a veteran player. When you're playing in a game, you should know how to manage the battlefield with the class you're playing. And if you don't know how to manage the battlefield with the class you're playing, ask the guy who normally plays it. Hey, how do you manage the battlefield? Like, what are your tricks for helping the fighter out? What are your tricks for keeping the wizard safe? Stuff like that.
Yeah, this isn't working the way I'm playing it. Frankly, for any of this, like, this is my second 5th edition campaign, and honestly, Adgern is just a rollover from the first one that I played. So I ask you guys a lot of questions when the cameras stop. Like, hey, I'm not doing this right. I know Prim is telling me I need to look at mage armor, but I have better spells.
She's going to keep telling you that because neither of the casters has mage armor, which... No surprises, Prim, but maybe that will get solved soon.
Oh no, I have far better 3rd level spells to be.
I know you do. I'm just saying that as a sorcerer, I'm allowed to swap spells.
Oh right, yeah, cheaty sorcerers. Yeah, but breaking out of your comfort zone and trying new things, while it doesn't let you see, it will not recreate the first game that you've played of Dungeons and Dragons. The time in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s when you played AD&D, basic D&D, 3rd edition, even 3.5. You're not going to be able to relive that unless you actually break out those rules and play it with the same people again. But shaking up what you normally play,
I can tell you 100% that's not going to work. It's not going to work. I
know very few people who are interested in playing dead systems, and when we do, it's a weekend of, hey, we're going to go play old school Warhammer. Hey, we're going to go play 1st edition D&D, and it's usually the first half of the session is us remembering how poorly the game's aged. But once you get back into the rhythm, it's like, oh, got it. Okay, I see what's happening there. So we actually have some great comments going on there with Vasha Stampede. He's saying he started terrified of any casting because it was scary and underwhelming. He challenged himself, or they challenged himself later on, and it turns out they love being a caster.
Yep.
Yeah, try something new, and you can find something really cool in there that you've never thought. 5th edition is a fantastic game for trying new things. It has a very low barrier to entry, and every class and every archetype can do something pretty cool.
5th edition is one of the few games where I'll tell people that even though it is more complex to play a caster, that you should not be afraid to do it as a newbie, because it is not that bad.
Yeah, I generally try to recommend going with the martial classes, a barbarian, a fighter, a paladin even.
In most systems, that's a good recommendation because they want to learn the combat system,
Yeah.
so they can understand the combat system, so they can figure out how to engage with it with magic. But in 5th edition,
yeah.
Firebolt is the same as hitting somebody with a bow. It's the same.
Yeah, and that is something I really do like about it. Is the mechanics are not quite as labyrinthian anymore. It's a really cool way to get involved. And this kind of brings us full circle. No, be a wizard. Stop listening to her. Stop listening to Die Rabbit there. Wizards are fantastic. This is actually the first wizard I've ever played. So this kind of brings us full circle to we've sort of teased this a little bit, but the idea of being the veteran player, being the grizzled old person over there, sorcerer.
Oh, Mac hates sorcerers. He hates them.
They should just be wizards.
Yeah, he hates them.
But yeah, sorry. As if you're the veteran player, you're the guy or the girl with the most experience at your table. You do kind of have a responsibility to be setting a good example for the less experienced players. You can go back and check out our greatest hits in our videos on demand for the tips that we've pushed out for other player tip episodes. If you are really experienced, if you've been playing this for years, you kind of should be looking at those and periodically self-reflecting and be like, hey, I know I dislike it when players talk over me or when someone isn't prepared at combat. Am I living up to the way that should be? Am I putting a good example for that? I know I don't need to be as locked in as a experienced player than a lot of the newer players do, because I can sort of keep it going in the back of my mind while I check my phone. But if the newer players see me on my phone, then they're going to kind of assume it's okay to be on my phone. That kind of thing. So what are your thoughts on that? Is that a worthwhile thing to be keeping in mind, trying to keep yourself to the best example you can be to the newer players?
If you are not trying to play the way that you would want somebody to play at your table, if you were running the game, no matter how experienced you are, you're being a jerk.
Yeah, that's a solid way to put that. If it's not a one-way relationship. It's not the Dungeon Master does all this stuff to entertain me. No, the Dungeon Master does all this stuff to give everybody a good time, whether it's then they're included. And there's been times where I've just been face palming super hard behind the screen or behind the screen when something goes completely sideways, but it's still a fun time. The problems come in when there's that one person who wants to do their own thing. Like, no, I'm here to do this. It's like, well, the adventure is going that way. Well, we're doing this thing, though. We're going to keep trying to get everybody to do the thing that they want to do. Or,
so
yeah.
This is a I don't want to say it's a trope. I want to say it's really a meme, but it's a meme because it happens in games where you have one player who insists on their way or the highway. Mm-hmm. And the most elegant solution I've ever seen for this is that the DM allowed that one player to hijack the campaign, and they basically adjusted to what that player wanted their character to accomplish, and went through the entire campaign. It was almost a year and a half long. And at the end of the campaign, the character and the player accomplished their goal, and then the world is destroyed by a lich.
Okay.
Like, because the whole thing was like the overall arc for the adventures that he had set up was that they would
To
go
stop
fight
a
this
lich,
lich.
yeah.
And it wasn't like wasn't foreshadowed, because specifically that was what they were told at the very beginning.
Yeah.
So what they went off and accomplished, great. You did it. And now the world is in 4 million years of darkness because you guys went off and did that instead of, saving the world.
I mean, 4 million years of darkness is good for some people. Liches and drow, seem to be doing pretty well with it. But yeah, that's. I don't know if I'd invest that much time into sort of stomping on a player's ideas.
I don't. Again, it's a meme. I'm sure it happened, and I guarantee you that the players involved probably had a lot of fun during the campaign, and only realized they had, somebody had made a mistake in how they approached the game and engaged with the group.
Yeah.
At the very end, when, hey, you did the thing that you set out to do, and everything is now great. Except you forgot to take care of the lich, so everything is now awful forever.
Yeah, that's one of the big things there is that ties back into the being willing to talk to your DM and other players when you have problems, and be receptive to to criticism from the DM and other players.
I guess this is another tip for veteran players, is like, depending on the setting that you're playing in, for new players especially, it's going to be a little bit jarring when they're introduced to the idea of feudalism and how that functions in a fantasy campaign. That can be a really big whoa moment for them. And as an experienced player, you should take a moment, either in that moment to talk to them about it, or after the game and just say, look, you have to step back personally from this, because yes, feudalism is pretty horrifying in a lot of ways, but it was also the best system they had available to them at the time.
Yeah, being able to separate your personal in-world values from and that's not saying like there's a whole bunch of very bright lines that you do not cross on that point, but things like democracy, that doesn't exist in a lot of systems. That doesn't exist in a lot of universes.
Think about how democracy would work in Forgotten Realms. Like, it would be chaos.
Yeah, I mean, you don't
even with magical messenger wondrous items, like the simple act of keeping an alliance between absolute monarchs functioning is nearly impossible. Democracy would be nothing, pandemonium.
Yeah, and this came into a lot when I was LARPing, and a lot of the things that we'll get into in the second half come from lessons I learned in that. But a lot of people keep trying to get out there and make the world an ideal version of what we're looking at ourselves in the real world, and it's just like your character wouldn't have an idea of wouldn't understand the ideas of direct or representative democracy and have the arguments between the two of them, because that's never been a conversation in this universe. And
there are qualifiers. There are settings where 100% there are functioning democracies, or at least something that approaches Greek democracy.
Yeah. So when I'm talking about
that's valid. But the issue becomes when you as a player are interacting with these governments in these games, a veteran player is going to know that you have to step back and find some personal distance between the reality for the people in that world and what your personal ideals are. Again, if you talk to your DM and your DM is cool with a let's free the dwarves campaign, then play the let's free the dwarves campaign.
Yeah. So I think that's enough on that subject. We don't want to go too deep down that rabbit hole. But some of the other things that as a experienced player, the examples you should be setting, I think tie into the very, very core mechanical stuff. Paying attention before it's your turn. If you are engaged and when the DM rolls to you like, all right, Mac, what are you doing? And you're like, well, it's my turn. So I survey, and any questions that I have, I can ask in the form of what my character is doing. Surveys and looks around for the nearest goblin that's threatening Adgern. All right, well, it's this goblin over here and there's another one over there. All right, cool. Well, I'm going to cast this spell that'll do that. That would be what my turn looks like, but it has a lot of But my turn actually is built on a couple different ideas of contingencies, problems that it's like, hey, if I look for a dwarf, I look for the nearest goblin, he's not actually within Burning Hands range. All right, well, there goes off that first plan I was going to do. But they're within Scorching Ray range. All right, well, I'm going to do Scorching Ray. Or they're not within any range. I'm going to dodge. Having a tier.
To the absolute root of that, Mac, I think we've talked about this before. Even if you're not interested, look interested.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you're sitting at the table like, bored.
Yeah. If somebody's going through their bardic music options and if you have no interest in that whatsoever, that doesn't matter. Look interested. You're the veteran player. You want to make people think that everything that's going on is important, otherwise they'll develop bad habits.
Yeah, it's one of the biggest things, and a lot of my roleplay experience comes from LARPing, because that's when you do that, it's not everyone sitting around a table, it's you dress up and you go out and be your characters, so you learn the lessons a lot faster there and fall into a lot of the pitfalls a lot faster there. One of the biggest things that we learned very quickly was being able to take newer players under your wing and showing them how to play the game, showing them how to exist in this universe, not just do the rules, but actually create a character that is and interact with the other characters in a meaningful capacity. A big part of that is giving up things I want to say for things you have to say. Listening to what you have to say and saying, yeah, no, that is important. I'll let the count know the next time I'm in court or whatever, and then my fancy NPC is going to wander off in the woods and disappear because we didn't have a screen to walk behind or any of that kind of thing. But yeah, being able to look engaged with other players is huge. And I know the first time that I went on a performance as I'm not going to say a bard that I played because I have a reputation to upkeep.
I believe you were playing a jongleur.
Yeah, no, it was actually a bard. It was straight up a bard. But going off on a performance that I had to do as that, and having everybody in the inn sort of staring. Oh, what is this thing here? No, the bard did not play the bagpipes. Dire Rabbit played a variety of different instruments. But having everybody sit there in rapture, like, oh yes, that's a thing. Yes, oh thank you so much. It's like, oh, that was really cool. I'm glad people liked that. And this was within my first couple events, and that sort of like latched in what I was doing, and it sort of made the entire experience grow and made me feel important in the world. If at your table you do something, it doesn't matter what it is, you do something and everyone else is off there checking their phone or like picking things out of their or looking at rules while it's not their turn.
I have never been to a LARP that did not have the put your phones away rule.
Yeah,
because that's the fastest way to destroy the atmosphere is have people on their phones.
Well, not even LARPing at that point, but at the table.
Yep.
If everyone's on their phone or reading the books or not paying attention to what's going on, kind of does, it kind of takes away from the, hey guys, I just did something really cool. Oh wait, what happened? Oh, it's my turn now, and
yep.
That hurts. Like that is really painful for a new player who thought that they had a really cool thing, and you, by not paying attention, sort of deprived them of that. Oh, good work moment. So that's a problem. You need to be you need to be engaged the entire time.
Yep.
Speaking,
I think we've killed that one.
Yeah. Let's see. Have we missed anything else in the first half here we want to talk about? I don't think so.
Nope. I mean, the big takeaway from that is that you're an experienced player. You have the ability to be more critical of yourself, so you absolutely should be more critical of yourself when it comes to these situations. A new player doesn't have the experience to know that they're doing something wrong, or that it's wrong to be on their phone.
Yeah, and if you can gently take a new player under your wing, be like, hey, I love the things that you did this session. There was a lot of really cool things that were being built out of this. If you think about doing it this way, or think about changing something a little bit that way, or put your phone away. It's only going to be a couple hours. It's going to be a good time. Excuse me. Or you go to the break, or whatever it is going on at your table. A little bit of constructive criticism from a veteran player can mean a lot of stuff, or just a whole lot to a new player. There's really, there's few things out there that's more like, hey, that person, they know what they're doing. I know that they know what they're doing. That can mean a lot to someone when someone comes, hey, good
Honestly,
stuff.
there are a lot of just life benefits to having the ability to put your phone away and not worry about it for 3-4 hours.
Yeah, yeah. I honestly, one of the reasons why I love diving into doing all the stuff with the Games Tavern is I put my phone on Do Not Disturb mode and I don't look at it the entire time. Huh.
You just got the curfew notice, didn't you?
No, this is I got a text from the girlfriend, so I'll talk about that later. Uh, but yeah, so we're gonna go on break for a couple minutes here. But before we do, I really recommend we're gonna be switching to the music or we're gonna be switching to some that has the break music on it that's made by Tabletop Audio. Guys, they're a fantastic website. I think it's run by just one dude. It might be run by a couple people, but
We love
otherwise,
Yeah, we love them.
yeah, it's
They are amazing.
absolutely fantastic
They make some great atmospheric music
for free.
Yeah, and they provide for free. Yeah.
Yeah, well, they do have the ability to be a patron of them. We're patrons of them on Patreon.com. They have all their links on tabletopaudio.com. You can follow them, no issues. Get in there and do it, but it's a great way to add some atmospherics there. And another thing, speaking of my angry girlfriend, she painted that. It's a owlbear that's now behind me. Just had to give that shout out there. So we're going to take a real quick break. We'll be back in about 5 minutes. Just do a palate cleanser and talking to some of the critical mistakes we've made and how to probably avoid those during your career as a tabletop game player. So we'll be back. Bye. Hey everybody, welcome back. We had a quick break there, and we're going to roll into a segment that both of us have kind of been looking forward to. Is probably not the correct word on that, but we're going to be digging deep into the personal world of our formative years of role-playing game players, and going into mistakes that we've made along the way. And as veteran players, things that we need to keep cognizant of. And a lot of these are actually things that I still need to be keeping in mind because
Oh,
I'm super
100%.
fallible.
Mac and I are total hypocrites on this subject because we're both very, very set in our ways players. But
Yeah.
we know we are, and we're trying to get better, which I think is what counts.
Yeah, and playing into a camera once or twice a week definitely is a mirror I was not hoping to ever have. So, hey. That actually ties wonderfully into the first one. I personally know that one of the problems that I've had, and I've had a DM or two pulled aside, is trying to hog the spotlight. It cannot be stressed enough that it is a collaborative storytelling adventure. Role-playing games, regardless of the system, is a collaboration amongst everybody at the table. It's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 players at the table, depending on how big your party is. It is incredibly important that everybody there has an opportunity to have a voice. That said, there can be times where it's like, hey, this is going to be the one that we're going to talk a lot about Rob's character. Rob, this is going to be great for your character and whatever it is that they want to do. You're going to be the main character this time. That happens. Not everyone's going to get, if there's 5 characters at the table, not everyone's going to get 20% of every single session. But at the end of a couple campaign sessions or end of a campaign, it should slice out to be roughly average.
Yeah.
And I know this is something I've struggled with quite a bit because, like, I have all the answers.
Spotlighting is a new concept when it comes to role-playing games, but it's a crazy old concept when it comes to everything that goes into role-playing games. Improv, acting, the screenwriting, and even comedic stand-up.
Yep.
The whole, how do I balance my energy with the energy of the rest of the group is important, because it is a collaborative experience. But the other side of that is, like, if you keep trying to do 110% every single time your group is together, you're going to get exhausted.
Yes. That ties wonderfully into one of the biggest tips I have to try and pretty much solve a lot of the problems that are coming up with this. And as a grown adult who's over 30, I cannot believe I'm about to say this, but take an improv course. Sorry, that's a fantastic way to learn the mechanics of improvisation. And role-play games are a lot of that.
So, no shame. I've been to several improv workshops myself. I am not an improv player. That is not my jam. But the skills that are practiced in those workshops apply to entire huge swaths of living your life. Like, just having a conversation well is something that gets taught in improv.
If I had to boil it down, and I do because this is my show and I'm making the rules. If I had to boil it down to the best thing I had to come out of improv, it's the concept of yes and. Someone says something that, and then this ties into why I build loose character backstories and have kind of loose character goals and sort of have a reason why my character does things.
Yeah.
As opposed to actually trying to, be like, oh, this is exactly what he's going to try and do, is because I want to have the flexibility that comes from yes and. You and I are playing a game together, and I say, hey, Rob, do you remember that time when we were fighting off goblins and, they lit your beard on fire? Well, that was wacky. And you go, oh, that never happened.
Well, that's bad because that's a beat that's been missed. And as an experienced player, you'd never want to miss a beat, especially if a new player is providing the drum roll. So just accept that hit, that your character's beard was at one point singed pretty badly, because it doesn't affect your beard. Your beard is fine. It's just fake beard.
Yeah. So being able to do that, and also when you are when you're a very experienced player, you should be able to know not to be positing up things in the yes and kind of method that are going to cause problems with the other player. Like something, oh, your beard got singed. Okay, yeah, that's fine. Hey, you remember that time when you killed that orphan? Might be an issue. Like, that's not...
That's not casual backstory stuff.
Yeah, you don't want to be taking away agency from other players in your improv opportunities. There are ways to try and talk away. I was like, I'm not sure, but if by orphan, do you mean that weird goblin thing? Because yeah, there are ways to play around that. Reed did improv in his 20s. Oh, that explains so much about Reed.
Does it though?
No, but
there are other things that we know about Reed that explain a lot more about Reed than he did improv in his 20s. But that does help. Thank you for painting that picture.
Thank you so much there. But yeah, even if you're never going to be, inviting your friends to your improv show, which I've seen happen very poorly more often than not, but sometimes community improv can be a lot of fun. Even if you're never going to be getting into the performance side of things, just getting there and seeing how you tell a story without a script. And there's actually a pretty codified, rigid way that these things work. It's very, very useful for around the table, because, correct me if I'm wrong here, Rob, but are we not all telling a story without a script?
Well, it depends. The GM might have a little bit of a script, but
GMs
everybody else is flying by the seat of their pants, hopefully.
Yeah, and the training that you get in improv on how to rapidly associate words with other words or ideas with concepts, or pick up the ball and run with what someone else has suggested.
To me, that's the biggest thing that comes out of improv is the idea that every engagement that you're involved in is a trust fall, and that you are going to trust whoever is on the other side of that engagement to catch you.
Yeah, I can't put it better than that. That's the biggest thing. Is so take some improv classes, guys. I don't know where you do it. Community college? Is that? I don't know.
Yeah, Google it. Sure. A community college will probably have the hanging. Do they still do the hanging things with the phone numbers that you call for improv classes?
Oh yeah. The bulletin board where you have to rip off the chads.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Mac and I are old. If that's
oh my goodness. Yeah. So anyway, what's happening in the chat? Eldon's hat. Yes, Eldon's hat is very, very important. Let's make that an emote. So anyway, yeah, back to other mistakes that Mac has made. Eventually we'll commission like a artist and musician to come up mistakes.
For Mac's mistakes.
Bing. So one of the things that I've made, and I think I've overcorrected on this, is getting focused on the mechanics. I've overcorrected by not giving a hoot about the rules. There was a time in my youth when I had a much shorter beard than I have now, when I would get very basically got very min-maxy and be like, oh, if I do this I can do that and I can get off these chains and make this thing happen. And this was just straight third edition. This wasn't even, it might have been 3.5. It was a while ago. And it was like, oh, I can do this and do that, and I can pick up this magic item and do that magic thing, and I can do all this stuff. And I'm sitting there on my turn, or before my turn, doing the math, figuring it all out, and then my turn comes like, hey, here's this thing I made happen. All right, anyway, back to what I was doing, and not being engaged with the table, being too focused on figuring out what I was going to do next, and not actually paying attention to the narrative, which is kind of the whole reason why we're here.
And that is a trap that many systems will present you with. 5e, thankfully, is not that bad mechanically. There's a whole lot to master. But third edition, yes, definitely had that issue where if you were not engaged in system mastery, you were not playing the same game as other players. Yeah, and
there's still a few systems that'll do that, and we'll get into this kind of stuff in a later episode. But yeah, I think it was first edition D&D and AD&D. If you wanted to be a wizard, you basically had to have a master's course in wizardology. Like that was just how that was going to work. You had to be an
yes
expert.
And no. It depended a lot. So I've talked about Rich, my friend's older brother Rich, who got us into D&D.
Yeah.
Rich, for all of his failings, which were few, to be honest with you, Rich was a good DM in the sense that he did not require you to have a master's degree in wizardology to play a wizard. He was basically that concept sounds cool. How does that fit within the wizard schema?
Yeah. And that's honestly how I've kind of shifted when I'm running. Like I have the Dungeon Crawl Classics over my shoulder there. A lot of that is, and pretty much even when I run 5e games, I'm not running 5e games. I'm not running Dungeon Crawl Classics games. I'm not running whatever game I'm lying and saying we're running. I'm running Mac's weird homebrew system that's a weird amalgamation of everything that lets people do what they want to do. That's just what that is. There's a weird zeitgeist thing that's piled up there of just piles of nonsense that I've learned over 15 years of doing this.
We talked about this when we talked about GMing advice. The worst thing you can say as a GM is no. Why? Why would you say that? Like, no is a very, very bad thing to say in general, but as a GM, it's the worst thing you can do.
Yeah.
You've closed down an opportunity, and that's bad.
Period. Yeah. Anytime I get some, and this is tying into the yes and kind of thing. Anytime a player's like, hey, can I do, I have a flask of water or endless water and I want to drown the dragon. It's like, well, that doesn't work the way, that's not going to work the way that you want it to. But this thing happens instead and you do get exit, it floods the dragon's lair and forces them to take flight or whatever other secondary effect that is still beneficial to the party.
You killed the dragon from boredom? I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, again, this comes back to, as a veteran player, you should not be presenting DMs with yes/no scenarios to begin with. But as a DM, especially a veteran DM, you should understand that saying no means that you've given up. And if whatever your scenario is that requires you to say no to a player's idea, you're gonna want to go back to the drawing board and figure out what you did wrong.
Yeah. So this seems like an excellent opportunity to kick to the chat while we still have a few more points we want to go into. But
Yep.
People in Chatland, that's a place, right? Chatland. Anyway,
Sure,
people hanging out and watch, viewers, audience, people we really, really like. First up, Dire Rabbit, thank you so much. I see what you did. The thing has left my screen, so I can't tell you exactly what you did, but it was fantastic. Thank you. But if there's been some bad habits you've fallen into as a, well, you don't know what you did either, but 2 thumbs up. Game Tavern thumbs up. You win. If there have been bad habits you've fallen into, kind of mistakes, somewhat of some kind of thing that bad habits or things you've been corrected on as a veteran player, chime in on the chat. We'll talk about it. We still have a couple that we've done. But we'd love to listen to what you guys have to say.
I want to jump in here.
Yeah, please do.
Because the next one is my personal favorite, which is not being prepared. And more specifically, not being prepared for a session, but in general, not being prepared. You know what you're doing. You are the most equipped person at the table, besides perhaps your game master.
Well, we all know game masters.
If you're not doing the prep work, why are you playing with the group?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a huge one where and I've fallen guilty to this multiple times. The game master has given me homework. He's like, "Hey, come up with this thing or that. Give me 5 names of someone in a short biography of a 2-sentence biography of someone from your backstory."
I am not saying that you need to be an A student, Mac. I am saying that you need to be a C student.
Yeah.
You need to put in some effort. Okay, you didn't hit the 12-page backstory requirement.
I hate backstories longer than a note card.
Yeah, right. Womp womp. He got 6 paragraphs. That's a lot for me.
Yeah, it's just a matter of I didn't do it. It's like, I'm probably not maliciously. I wasn't like, I'm not going to do this because screw that. So much as he gives us homework and I don't think about it until the next Thursday.
But I just did this to Reed. We're on episode 10, and I just gave Reed my item wish list.
I think we're on episode 12, aren't we?
Are we?
I don't know.
I gave him my item wish list on episode 10.
So what I'm hearing here is Warrior Streak does want 12-page backstories.
Yeah. So, 10 sessions into a campaign, I'm just now giving the GM tools that he needs to do things like loot allocation. That is me fucking up as an experienced player.
Yeah.
No ifs, ands, or buts. But part of that was because the concept that I had for the character was forcibly adjusted almost from the beginning, and I'm just now catching up to where the character concept is going to hopefully move towards from a mechanical perspective, and that's one of the things that you do kind of need to know when you're giving an item wish list.
Yeah, it's you need to know what's going on. Like I haven't given Reed an item wish list. That's because I don't know what's going on in the mechanics of the game.
Right,
So,
and that's fair. And
yeah.
and you've told Reed that, and Reed said, "Great, got it. I know what wizards need."
Yeah, and
So,
I think I found the magical pointy hat with like stars and shit on it. Like
mhm.
it's like, oh cool, what's it do? It counts as a fancy. It counts as a focus and lets me like cast a cantrip I don't know. Boom,
Yep.
done. And I'm wearing a stereotypical wizard's hat. Awesome,
That's
I love it. It's perfect.
wizard crap that I want. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that's exactly where I'm at this point. Uh,
Yeah,
speak,
always
speaking
hats.
of Reed, Warrior Streak's got some a couple things that he's said that his mistakes have been, and we're happy to lambast. No, a lot of these are actually things that I know I'm guilty of myself, and these do require a little bit of self reflection when you're doing it, or when you're looking to make sure you have them. Verbal tics is huge. I just did one there. Doing filler words, especially if you're on the DM side of the screen, doing filler words to fill out the speech you're trying to do, or terms you say in repetition, like Reed says, and with that a lot. He's trying to get better on it, but it's still a thing that he knows he needs to work on. I probably have some. I haven't been
I am not
self-reflexive
completely down on filler words. I think it's important for most people to simply be allowed to say what they need to say at the pace that they need to say it. Some of us are trained professional public speakers,
Yes.
and we are trained to, instead of say or use those words that fill space in a sentence, we're trained to pause. And ideally, as a player, that's a habit that you're going to want to develop, but
Oh
it's
yeah.
not required.
Oh no, no, not at all.
If you or I don't care. That's you.
Yeah.
If you tell me that you don't like it, you're gonna get a big count of how many times you said or some other verbal tick filling space while you're trying to think, and that's what it is. Your mind is trying to catch up to what your mouth is doing.
Yeah, we as humans don't like silence,
Mhm.
so we try to again do it there. So we try to push out some kind of noise to make it indicate that we're doing something. That no, my brain has not ceased to function, despite the
Yeah,
fact that I've run out of things to say.
it's conversational pacing too. It's a way of signaling to the other party that I still have things that I want to say.
Yeah, but it's one of those things where, and I again just falling into it right there, the past 3 seconds, where I kind of get ahead of myself as I'm still forming. That's a thing I
Mhm.
do, and I'm working on it. I don't know what the term for what that collection of horrible noises would be, but it's a thing, and it's a
Yeah.
thing I'm trying to focus on. So being aware of the things that I say that may or may not be intentional, or my own speaking habits and my own speaking lexicon, that kind of thing is useful to be aware of, because as a veteran player, if I know how Max speaks, and frankly I don't, if I know how I speak in my normal everyday life, I can very easily take, all right, this is how I know this I work. Take all of that, put it on the shelf over there. This is how Adgern speaks, and make something up that's completely different to everything that I say. That's an insane skill that I do not have. But it's something that, as a veteran player, being able to work on that's a really cool skill. That's a really fun thing to be able to do. And it kind of kicks into a little bit more of making your character feel more realistic, as opposed to somebody speaking with my voice, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about this too, and we've joked about this as well.
Yeah.
Like when Rafe speaks Undercommon, he speaks with an Australian accent. I'm going to be honest with you. I know enough Australian to be dangerous, but not enough
It's
that
country
I'm
of criminals
comfortable.
That's the whole thing.
Jibber
Right?
jabbering in Australia. Yeah, there's a lot of really interesting Australian slang.
There is. I feel like not going into it today, but yeah, there's a lot of really cool stuff there. That's actually why I do the Scottish accent horribly. It's a horrible Scottish accent, but that's why I do it for Adgern, because
So,
I don't
fun
normally
fact:
speak in that stupid accent.
have we talked about this? In Scotland, dwarves have a Russian accent.
Yeah, that is actually a really cool thing that I think we can save that. We'll unpack that a little bit here, but we can save the meat and potatoes for that for a later episode. But yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah. I think we have one more thing on our list, and it looks like Reed did point out that his 6-second rule for combat is one of those ways of forcing players to both pay attention and also speed up their thought process.
Yeah, one of the big. That's a. If the GM has to get in and say, all right, I'm imposing a rule to fix this problem that we're having, it is now officially a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're kind of. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
It's a common problem, which is why
Yes.
the X amount of seconds per turn in combat rules are common.
It is. For the. There you go, now centered. For what we're aiming for here is trying to get it so that as players you can proactively get ahead of that. I know that in my in past role playing experiences I wasn't the most attentive at the table, so I personally try to get ahead of knowing what's going on and get make sure I have a couple options planned out so I don't have to butt into and don't have to force the GM to make the 6-second or 10-second rules. Because if I can be like, hey, here's a pile of really interesting things that I'm doing, and it's things I'm saying and really cool narrative stuff, okay, it can run a couple seconds past 6 seconds. But if it's just sitting there, it's like, how many goblins are on me? Where am I looking at here? What's happening? Yes, you need to impose a 6-second rule. But I personally try to avoid doing that as much as possible, just because I want to get the players on the side of where they're doing it to do it better, as opposed to doing it to please the DM and follow the rule that they've set. And as veteran players, you absolutely should be doing that. You should know how to interact in combat. The 6-second rules and whatever the time limit is that your party uses is useful, especially for newer players, because it's kind of like training wheels. Like, hey, do it in this time limit, or you're going to do your default action. And that's a great way to get people thinking rapidly in the game and force them to think about it. But after a while, you should be able to remove that rule and not kick that in. I try to avoid putting extra rules in. Personally.
It's only in place when we're being bad. So
every time we play.
I mean, we do tend to get into our heads about combat often enough that it is worth reminding us that there's a time limit in real life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. This gets back to our last prepared talking point, which is, as a veteran player, maintaining the distance between what your character's knowledge is and what your knowledge is, and how that sets a good example for other players.
Yeah, I spoke to a couple people on, I posted in the TGT Discord for the staff channels to see, hey, what problems do you guys have? This one came up a couple times, actually, is being a difficulty distinguishing something that another character does or that is done to me and as my character as happening to me or my character, basically distinguishing in-game action from out-of-game action and from the characters and players who did them.
Yeah.
It's
I mean, developing that distance takes a while. That first character that you play, oh man, you are so emotionally and intellectually and in some cases even physically connected to that character. It's tough to build that separation. But as an experienced player, you should be on like character 12 or 13. You should have the ability to step back and say, Jonah the Smith is definitely not me. I'm interested in Jonah's success, but if Jonah fails, I'm not going to take that as a personal failure.
Yeah, a big part of that ties to the idea of role-playing games aren't win-lose. If you went to the table and had a good time, you won. That's all. Especially for newer players, that's a harder hurdle to jump over.
Well, that big lesson, the one that
Yeah,
does not come without experience, it can't. It just can't. Is that failure is not permanent.
yeah. And
You know.
I know I put the note underneath this footnote in our collaborative notes,
Yeah.
uh, saying that this is a huge problem with LARPing. Like I love LARPing. I did it for many years. It's a when if you get attached to your character at the table because you have the model on your character sheet and you role play everything, you put the accent on, it's great, and then they die or something bad happens to them. It's like, oh, that really hurts. That's the character I was doing. If you're LARPing, you don't have a character. Well, I mean, you do have a character sheet, but you don't have the miniature. You dress up in the clothing, you run out and do that, and things that happen to your character do physically happen to you. Someone hits you with a sword, and both you and your character are hit. So it's a much harder line to see. It's very blurry there, and I know I personally overcorrect with this dramatically because of my experience in LARPing, because I've seen the very negative things that can happen if someone has been playing a character for so many years and then they get pushed into the room of lenders and they didn't build that appropriate buffer. And I can see that happen, and it's not good for anybody involved. It requires everybody involved knowing what's everybody's relationship is with their character and how okay they are with character death.
So not to single out Vampire LARP because it does not deserve to be singled out here.
Oh,
I've
vampire.
seen this go very badly in
Yeah.
Vampire LARP when somebody's and I should be clear here. In Vampire LARP, bad things don't happen to you unless you've done a lot of bad things and made a lot of mistakes.
Yeah.
Um, but people who are now being faced with the consequences of those mistakes, and I'm talking like over weeks and weeks of game,
Yeah.
they've made a series of either really poor decisions or they've failed very important roles or they've insulted very important people and they end up eating a pretty big consequence. And in Vampire LARP, um, torpor is your major consequence, where your character is basically you're retired for 6 months. Play another character.
Yeah. This almost feels like something we can unpack in like a half an episode kind of thing, because
Yep.
distinguishing between in-game and out-of-game actions, between things that happen to my character and things that happen to me, or things that your character does, are not necessarily things that you do and are not indicative of how you feel about me as a person. It's a very messy world to be walking around in. It's a very messy
Yep.
problem to be walking around in,
I
and
think I think
yeah,
LARPing is probably what helped us move far away from this, is
yeah,
because the vendettas and then the backbiting and the everything that goes into the emotional energy expended in Vampire LARP, for instance, it's just exhausting. I don't have time for it. I
what,
don't have the energy for it. I'm not interested in being involved in your personal vendettas. I go to Vampire LARP to play a character. My character either succeeds or fails. If my character succeeds, then good. The prince is happy with him. If he fails, bad. The prince is not happy with him. And if he fails and fails and fails, and the prince says, put him in torpor, I'm not going to take that personally. But I have that distance that I have from experience.
So
But
Vampire was your, without going into chapters or individual meetings and all that, Vampire was your LARP of choice?
No.
No.
It was the LARP of choice of my circle of friends, and
Mm,
therefore was the LARP that I participated in.
bingo. Yeah. Yeah, mine was
Yeah.
a single chapter up in New Jersey. I don't want to go into it because things.
Yep.
Uh, yeah. Yeah, I dabbled a little bit in the vampire stuff, and it can be really great. It really can. There
I
was a
am.
couple chapters in New York City that would,
Yeah.
one of the members owned a bar that had like a disco club underneath it, and then the club was only open like Saturday nights or whatever. So any other night, the vampire players would go hang. They'd schedule it obviously, but they'd hang out in the club, like the disco, because people could still go to disco. They hang out in the dance floor club underneath, and then go up to the bar in character and be like, "Oh yes, I'm a vampire. It's fantastic, haha," and interact with the patrons and all that other stuff. I don't know if the bartender actually ever told people that that was what was happening there, or it's just like, "Hey, there's this weirdo in like way too much makeup next to me," but just caked on layers of foundation. It was great. I did it a couple times. It was really fun. Not my cup of tea for things I want to do all the time, but
Yep.
I can see how that kind of drama, if you've really invested in that, and with LARPing, if you put hundreds of dollars in the character with just clothing, and suddenly have that character ripped in half because they decided to go tackle a vampire. Sorry, that happens. Pick or it didn't happen. Dire Rabbit, what pictures are you looking for there? Because
I think Dire Rabbit wants to see you in vampire regalia.
there are actually no pictures of that.
Yep.
There are plenty of pictures of me running around in like tights and less than tights. I was a far fitter man 5 years ago, but yeah, running around in tights and gambeson and armor and.
So, bring us back around.
Yeah, please do.
Developing that distance takes time. New players are not going to have it. As a veteran player, it's very important that you establish that it's something that they should have.
Yeah.
But don't expect them to have it. Again, think about how long it took you to get over your first character. Think about how long it took you to get over the first character that you had that died in a campaign. Like that's a big deal.
I know, especially you have kicked us around a couple times on the chat, and I would actually love you to dig into this a little bit more. The idea of talking to your players about player death, talking to or character death, not player death. We're not doing that. But the idea of actually getting out there and speaking with them and kind of preparing them. I've never really done this in my games, but that's because I don't run games for brand new players for the most part. And when I do, it's still kind of built into the whole, hey, I'm running a game where people might die. That's built in there, and I'm not exactly the most uncalloused person in the world. So I'm very, very interested to hear how you would approach that kind of subject. How do you speak to your players about death?
I've had this happen several times where I have new players get their characters into situations that reasonably should result in the death of the character. And one of the big things that I tend to do is when we hit that point, I hit pause. I basically say, hey, today's session is over. I want to take a second and talk about what's going on in the campaign right now, because we're hitting a very high climax point, and I need to talk to Jim about what's going on with Ragnar the Barbarian, because Ragnar is in a very bad place right now, and I want to see how Jim wants this to play out. So today's session is over. I'm sorry, we're cutting it 20 minutes short, but I need to talk to Jim about Ragnar, and then of course I have that conversation with Jim about Ragnar and how Ragnar has overextended himself, and there is a good chance that he should die here. And if you, Jim, are comfortable with that, and if you're not comfortable with that, please tell me, because we can figure something out. And it may involve Griffin Riders swooping into the rescue, or something equally fantastic. But it fundamentally involves taking agency away from you for a moment. I have to do that if your character is going to survive, and I must do that if I'm going to kill your character. So you're talking about an agency violation here. And that's why you want to have the conversation, especially with a new player.
Yeah, that's the agency thing is a very big. It can be a very big sticking point. It's something that I personally try to avoid ripping away player agency as much as possible.
Yep.
It just doesn't work well if you're just like, hey, I know you built all this stuff, you want to do these things, but surprise, didn't happen. And that's not fun for a lot of players. That's not actually. I don't think it's fun for pretty much any player.
I had a player who was constantly looking for ways to have his characters die heroic deaths. That was one of the things that he was into. I know that kind of player.
Yep.
And those are great players to have, because it allows you to have the group grapple with death without anybody really being unhappy about it.
Yeah, that's one of the big kind of tips I've kind of come up with on this kind of point. I said kind of a lot in that last sentence. One of the big tips I've come up with on that point is, and I haven't done it yet, so Reed, hang on, it's going to be coming. But it's ways to, I'm okay with my characters dying because I recognize they're not me. But if we want to have the kind of thing where characters can come back, I usually, if the character dies or X thing happens where it's like, hey, they might be dying, I tend to pepper in a couple. This is the way that this person might have come back, based on various things in their backstory, liches that they've happened to be indebted to or have pissed off and are now going to come back as a soul slave or whatever. I like to have that kind of thing in there, and I like to have that kind of thing with my players. Where it's like, hey, if your character dies, okay, I'll pull you aside after one session and talk to you. I don't do a whole lot of the preloading of the conversation. I might need to think about doing that a little bit better. But it's one of those like, hey, I've killed your character, Rob. After the session, you're going to stick around a little bit longer. Yep. We'll pop out some more beers. And we'll be like, hey, so if you're okay with this being permanent, it can be permanent. If not, if you really want to get back to playing, whatever you want to go back to playing, Arglethorpe, the Wizard of Doom, or whatever it is your character was. Okay, we can do that. We can bring back Arglethorpe, but I need you to give me reasons why it will happen. Why this is a thing that can happen, or why this is a thing that should happen. And very often it can be something as simple as, oh yeah, there's a lich that lives next to my village, and I sold him my soul. So when I die in this form, they come back, and I said Arglethorpe, damn it. Sorry. When his soul gets trapped and he comes back as a flesh golem of some kind. Okay, cool. The lich can do that, or any other. Basically work with the player.
Well, I mean, D&D flat out default allows a resurrection for a level 5 adventuring party. The death of a character can immediately become a series of adventures as they gather the things that they need to resurrect that character.
Yeah. Oh, I hate the Tevkagum so much. But yeah, no, that's the death thing in D&D is a lot. It's a lot harder to kill players in D&D now, unless you're playing some of the old school dungeons that have instant death traps, like I'm doing on Saturdays with the Tomb of Horrors.
I mean, even then, character dies, it's not a big deal.
There are a couple. I think there's like 2 traps in there where it's like you walk into this thing and you no longer exist. Period. And you can't be resurrected, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of great stuff.
Right, yeah, disintegration traps, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like, oh, your soul is gone. So there are those kinds of things. But those don't really exist in 5th edition anymore, except for holdovers from other systems. So it's definitely a way to be able to bring back characters.
Yep.
One of the best ways, one of my previous DMs did this. We were playing a campaign where we were jumping from plane to plane or planet to planet. It's hard to tell. It was Pathfinder, so who cares? The lore. And we ended up in a place where there was like dragonkin and flying dragon mounts and all this other stuff. And my character bit the dust hard. Like it was one of those things where there's a fight over there, my paladin's over here fighting, they come back and there's just dusty armor. So he's dead, gone, not coming back. The DM, without missing a beat, it's like, all right, well, sorry, that's the end of the session. You're dead. But throughout the next week, but for the next Thursday, pushed me on all of the stats for, hey, if you, I don't want you to walk away from this, but if you want to keep playing, here's a character you can take over right now that's in this zone that is a really cool opportunity to play as a dragon person. It's like, oh, cool, that's fantastic. I really like that. And that's what I did. It was a fun time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, again, I think that there are many approaches to handling death as a game master. But I think as an experienced player, your approach to this should be finding ways to avoid new players having to experience death without any preparation.
Yeah.
And that comes back to that limited allowable metagaming where you're like, hey guys, my character may not necessarily know that, but I'm going to go ahead and say he knows that a young red dragon is far too much of a challenge for this group of adventurers if he's going to encourage them to retreat.
One of the things I really, really do like about 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons is it's incredibly hard to kill someone under level 3. Mm-hmm. If you've paced your adventures right, you might put someone down and have them do a couple of death saving throws.
Yeah.
But getting them to fail 3 of them is very hard without someone else running up and doing a medicine check. And you're like, oh yeah, you rolled an 8 for that medicine check? Yeah, that works. You win. Congratulations. They're stabilized. They're not dying. Good times. So it's very easy to fudge that nowadays and keep players alive, which is kind of good for, especially for newer parties where they're still getting their sea legs.
Yep. Again, I come back to my preference and my experience tells me that the best way to handle a character death is to pause the game, talk to the player, figure out what they want to do. If they're comfortable with the character dying, and trust me, as many players as there are who cannot handle their character dying, there are as many players who are totally like,
Yeah.
gung ho, let's do this. This character's going down in a blaze of glory. It's gonna be awesome. That's again, you can discuss this in session 0 with your players, but before it happens in the course of a campaign, it's a really good idea to take a pause and discuss it again. Just make sure that they're comfortable with how things are going to go. And Mac's method, where you let things play out in the session, and then after the session you figure out what's going to go on, is a fine way to handle things in something like D&D, where there are many ways to fix the mistake.
Yeah, and I'm personally, as a DM, or GM, regardless of system, I'm not above having, you leave the dungeon and you see the vendor who's selling the magical orb of this thing, where it'll take you on the quest to do that and bring back your partner.
Yeah,
and
Deus Ex Machina is fine. It's fine.
Yeah,
it's completely fine.
But that's more on the DM tips kind of thing.
Yeah.
Let's see. It feels like there's a lot of stuff happening in the chat and I haven't been paying attention to. Well, Critical Overload's talking about her DM in the Tyranny of Dragons campaign. I wish I was. I would love to play more of those. They sound like a lot of fun. A couple things from Stream Elements. Blame Mac. Yeah, that's fair. Oh, hey, it's Mr. Smithwick's birthday. Happy birthday, Mr. Smithwick.
Oh, indeed. Happy birthday.
Hopefully we'll get together and celebrate sometime. So out there, birthdays. Out there, Critical Overload, Kick Up High, Dire Rabbit, Warrior Streak, Mr. Smithwick, anybody out there, and Fang, if there are problems that you guys have encountered, any kind of bad habits you've gone into, I guarantee you, whatever your bad habits are, Rob and I have either had them or have dabbled in them. So let us know. We'd love to kind of unpack our things that are close to that, or talk about your bad habits. Throw them in the chat, and we'll talk about how we've kind of gotten over those kinds of things. One of the ones that I didn't really put on here, and it's kind of worth going. Oh, here we go. First time playing since actually doing tabletop in like 1998. So I don't even know what I'm doing. Well, welcome back. That's a lot of people have actually been falling into that category now. 5th edition is a great way to be coming back. I know a couple of guys on the Games Tavern haven't played in years or decades and are back now. So it's a great time. 5th edition is good for that. But biting nails, yes, biting nails is a bad habit, I assume. Oh, hey, this kind of ties into what I was going to go into. Taking notes. I personally don't. I have one of those, I'm good at remembering things in a story. I'll put that. That's what I remember, and I'm very comfortable saying if I don't remember this, my player doesn't, or my character doesn't remember that.
We're probably bad people to ask because we're trained observers, so we have memory tricks and we understand how to retain key details over a long period of time. So we're the kind of people that don't necessarily need to take notes, although I think at some point we will take a look at my notebook, which is full of scribbled notes, because I don't necessarily need to, doesn't mean I'm not going to. Yeah, I do find that the difference, as I get older, the difference between what I remember and what I've written down can be interesting.
I've kind of built that in with Adgern, where he's not good with names. He's pretty racist, and he's a jerk. So, I walk away knowing 10 key points of the thing. Adgern walks away from a session knowing 5 key points and 3 fuzzy things. Okay, cool. So he's going to screw up names. He doesn't know Rafe's name. He's Ralph or whatever. So I play into that kind of a little bit. That said, one of the most veteran players I know who's been playing Dungeons & Dragons solidly, like the same, it's amazing. He doesn't watch this show, so I'm not going to name call him. He's been playing in the same group of friends since 1981. They do monthly campaigns, so that's still a lot of sessions. But they haven't upgraded their until 2 years ago. They didn't upgrade to 5th edition. Before that, they were playing still in 81 would be AD&D, and he played with us he played with us a lot, and he would take notes for every single thing that was happening, despite easily being the most veteran player at the table. He knew exactly what was happening. He knew how to play games. He'd been playing them since Dungeons and Dragons was a thing, effectively.
I will say this: my veteran player take on this is it's going to depend on the character. Rafe is a bit of a scatterbrain character, so the fact that I don't remember everything perfectly works really well for Rafe. But the flip side of that is, like, if I'm playing a character that is a trained investigator, I'm taking notes because that character would take notes. And in character, I'm also taking notes so that I can refer to my notes.
Yeah, if my character would be taking notes, I take notes. That's how I do it, and please do not use me as an exemplar for taking notes just because that's my solution to it. I'm lazy. I don't like having pens in my hand, because if I do, I'll end up like fidgeting with them and twirling them and throwing them up in front of the camera. My workspace, I'd show you it. It's not clean, actually, but there's nothing in here I could fidget with. So being able to not do that.
I don't have any fidget toys on my desk either. That's weird.
So let's see what else is happening. Critical Overload is learning to take notes because a few buddies are doing it, and she's worried that the program. Oh, where we lost it. The program schematics they're using Fantasy Grounds isn't how we should do it. Okay, this actually does tie in really well with some of the stuff that we're doing on Tomb of Horrors, the now 4-shot on Saturdays at 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Whatever, it's 1 p.m. Eastern Time this weekend. We have our players, because we're playing Theater of the Mind, which is kind of the way you need to be playing Tomb of Horrors because it's an old school game. It doesn't come with the player map. You can look up player maps online, but I prefer to do Theater of the Mind games myself. A lot of our players are taking their own or writing their own maps in that's their note-taking kind of thing, and I encourage that. That's fantastic. That gives them the way to build in and sort of like, all right, I see what's happening here. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. It's hilarious to see everyone's cartography skills when they hold them up in front of the camera. But just being able to do that we don't have physical maps, you don't have a visual representation. You are responsible for understanding your own perspective, and I really like doing that.
Dire Rabbit had a couple of questions, actually.
Yeah.
How many sets of dice do you have on the table? So the answer from me, and I am a strange outlier, is like 1 augmented. Just 1.
Yeah. Right now, within arm's reach, and this is going to be fun, I have my Tome of Secrets. And that has 2 whole sets and extra D20s, including my metal set. I have 2 of these. Oh, I dropped it. I have 2 of my DCC dice sets, which are whatever, it's here. Whatever, it's 2 of these. I have extra D8s for some reason. I have my L'Oreal Silverhand limited edition official Dungeons & Dragons dice set available at your friendly local game store, probably. I don't know. Really cool. And my personal favorite... Oh, wait, hold on. No, wait. My boxes of Elder Dice. These came in handy when we did our Cthulhu one-shot. You can check that on the videos on demand below, I think. But each of these is their own set of dice with extra D6s. And my personal favorite... my gallon baggie of extra dice. So, oh wait, completely forgot. My, whatever the hell this is.
Yep.
4 dice fall out.
Got
2 sets.
1 collapsible dice tower with 1 augmented set of dice in easy reach. And I have a huge tray of miscellaneous Chessex dice For older players, you bought the 1 pound bag of Chessex and they had like 8 bajillion dice.
Oh, I forgot the pound of dice bag. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that was a good time. Well, also, still within arm's reach, I had my. This is the games club I was involved in New Jersey. So, but I got 2 or 3 sets of dice and mountains of custom dice in there.
Yeah. So it's not that I don't have a ton of dice. It's just that I don't tend to carry around a ton of dice.
Yeah.
The dice kit that's currently sitting at Reed's house is much the same as the one that's sitting on my desk. It's probably closer to 2 full sets, but it's not. I just never personally felt the need to carry around multiple sets of the same dice. Just
Yeah.
how I feel.
If we weren't if I wasn't playing from my home computer, I would have just the Tomo Secrets, which is 2 sets of dice, and probably the additional 2 sets of dice in the wooden dragon sleeve that I pointed out that has my character model in it.
Yeah.
What else we have? How many character? Okay, so Reed has all of the dice. Always need more. That's fair.
Suppose I'm not being completely fair. I do have a giant bag of Star Wars dice sitting on my desk, but
That
they're
counts.
Star
That
Wars
counts.
dice.
Star Wars dice is also technically a game. Cat's eating
Yeah.
my lav mic. That might explain a lot of problems. So notes. Do you type or handwrite your notes?
Oh, handwritten.
Absolutely.
The whole challenge of being able to read my own notes afterwards is key to the experience of trying to remember just what the fuck we were doing.
Yeah, that's. I have a very weird handwriting, and I will not dig into that here. But my handwriting style is bizarre and stupid, and I dare I say wrong. It's like 4 or 5 different languages that I don't remember the characters in English for cursive because I studied cursive 25 years ago at this point. 20 years ago? I don't know. Years ago. Decades ago at this point is when I learned cursive, and I haven't looked at it since. So I still try to take notes in cursive, but unfortunately it's just an amalgamation of various letters and characters from other languages that I studied and failed at learning anything about, except how to spell, how to do their M, because why not? About 30% of my cursive is actually Cyrillic, so yeah. Elder Dice, so much madness. Yes, lots of madness there. Rob, here's an important question. Who are you, Rob?
Oh my goodness. Apparently I'm a person that has failed everyone on not having enough dice, which is ridiculous because I do. I have an entire tray with a 1 pound bag of Chessex sitting on that tray. But again, I don't, on my desk, this is it. Besides the Star Wars dice.
I agree. I hate
This gets
choosing.
the job done.
But a tray is important. I'm going to show off my tray because got to rep the WZ gear. Warp heads. Oh, there we go. Again, it was just my club in New Jersey. But yeah, I like having a tray. I like having branded gear. I think we might eventually have branded gear for the Games Tavern. I know you can win some branded gear from the Games Tavern periodically.
We have them. I don't know if Reed is going to make those available to everybody soon. Hopefully.
I hope it's available to me. Anyway, so Vash the Stampede actually does have an interesting question. What are your dice made of? He says metal or resin, but there are so many other great opportunities there. So your fanciest dice set, what is it made of?
Well, let me talk about the one that I'm currently actually holding because that's the closest one that I have. These are silvered steel.
So it has like a silver.
Yeah.
Nice.
They're weighty. I would not want to just hit a table with these.
No.
I have other metal dice that are not as hefty. I assume that they're not made out of steel. They're made out of aluminum or something. I have one set of gemstone dice that I hate because they're gemstones. Like they're actual cut gemstones. So they're not balanced.
Yeah,
So,
well, Die Rabbit actually just mentioned she has amethyst dice.
yeah.
What the
So they're
hell?
not they're not balanced. So rolling with them is an adventure.
Do not roll them. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The fanciest dice I have, and I hate this box. Actually, I don't. I hate opening the box.
Oh yeah,
I
they
have
only get
I have
Only get rolled in the felt table.
yeah, I have bronze dice. I
Yeah.
really like those, but that's because I'm a weird nerd. Uh, Ideally, and the last time I was at PAX Unplugged this year, so 2019's PAX Unplugged, and there was a group. There was a stand that was selling tungsten, an entire D20 set of tungsten dice. The entire
People who
thing,
really hate their table.
yeah, the entire thing weighed, I want to say, like 8 pounds for your polyhedral set. Like tungsten is
Yeah,
insane.
that sounds about right for tungsten.
But we're gonna, I'm because I love playing this game. I'm gonna kick it over to the chat. How much do you believe that people were paying? Because I saw at least two people walk away with the tungsten dice set because you could tell because they had scoliosis suddenly. How much do you believe people were paying for a tungsten dice set at a convention? In the chat, I will give you
Yeah.
the actual answer after we get one or two responses.
I just want to point out that 8 pounds is that's the weight medicine ball that I use for working out with.
It's insane. Mind
That's-
you, if I
That's
ever
not a
had
like.
to-
That's not like. Wait.
if I ever had this much money, I would, or this much money to blow on this kind of stuff, I would absolutely have a tungsten dice set.
I bet titanium dice would be cheaper.
Oh, absolutely they would, and they'd be better in basically every
Every
single
way,
capacity. Yeah, we'll go with Price is Right rules. Let's do this. I have a close enough number in my head. Yeah, they were beautiful. Or they weren't beautiful. They looked like brushed steel. But they had the same ballistic properties of depleted uranium. So hey,
Or tungsten. Hey.
All right, so we've got 500 and 250. Any other guesses? I'll give you a minute there. So we'll chat about that. The most interesting set of dice that I personally own, and I alluded to this, of the L'Oreal Silverhand dice set. Again, official D&D stuff. And I really, really like these because they have more than just my beautiful, very large D20s. These were actually...
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's
that
quite
is a
large.
sizable D20.
But it also includes a whole bunch of art cards with some information that you may or may not know. It's written as basically L'Oreal Silverhand, the Open Lord, I think, of Waterdeep.
Yes.
Basically,
Open
King of
Lord
Waterdeep. What her opinions are on a variety of denizens of the world and other cities. Durgar, Durgar? The owner of the... I could have looked it up because I'm holding
The
it.
Yawning Portal?
Yeah, the owner of the Yawning Portal is in there. The Yawning Portal
Right.
itself is in there. Other cities are in there. It's basically, what does this really, really important person think about all of these different places? Okay, so we have a whole bunch of... Durgan? No, I don't think it's Durgan. Is it? Is it Durgan? I don't know. Yeah, sure. He's probably looking it up. Durgan. So we got a bunch of things. So we have 250, 500, 250, 599, 450, 499, 600. The answer, and I'm within 20 either way, was $630-ish for a set of tungsten dice.
There you go.
I want them. I want them so badly. Considering that a D20 by itself usually costs about $90 to $100 of tungsten. And I saw a lot more people buying that than the 600 change. So the winner there would be Vash Stampede. You receive all of our kudos. Thank you very much, man. Or lady.
You know more about elements than the rest of us.
Yeah. So, go ahead.
$630 for dice. You know, I am the kind of person that will make a stupid purchase like that. I am not sure that I could justify that there at that time on the spot. I would have had to have gone expecting to buy $600 worth of dice.
Yeah, but that's where I bought my my Tome of Secrets and the metal dice that are within it, and that whole thing ended up coming out to be about 150, and I feel like I might have overpaid a little bit, but I was still super happy about it at the time.
The ones that I have, I think, were $60.
Yeah, that's I think mine were 60-ish for bronze.
Yeah.
Which is, frankly, for a casual player, that's a lot of money for a set of dice. But
I should say this: I do also have a set of wooden dice. I would also not recommend them. They have similar problems to gemstones where they don't roll the way that you would expect them to.
Yeah, they look really nice. They're a cool display piece. I know that there's a couple guys that do. I think Mr. Smithwick does uh, cast dice. Am I right there, Mr. Smithwick? Do you cast
Yes.
dice with resin?
Yes, he is a caster. Um, I do have a pair of bone D6s.
Ooh.
Genuine human bone D6s.
So you're a monster. That's great to know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I actually bought them from a
Necromancer.
no, from a Native American shaman. And I
Interesting.
can't remember what they were for in his practice.
Sending
they
you
were
to hell, basically.
Yeah, I don't know, but they're dope.
That
Also, they
is
roll really well.
that is actually really cool. I've seen there was someone who did like mammoth tusk d6s a while back, and they were like,
There are a lot of people who will make ivory or bone dice. Polyhedrals are hard
yeah,
because there's a lot of math involved, but D6s are not that uncommon.
yeah. This was it was some company that was charging about $200 to $300 for a polyhedral set of mammoth tusk. It's like, oh, that's actually pretty cool. If you pro tip, because trade of ivory for a certain year is illegal in pretty much every civilized country now, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you find antique dice, big quotes, antique, before 1920-ish, any dice you find that are older than that are going to be made of ivory. Just that's how that works. Bakelite, what turned into modern plastics, didn't really become a thing until the 1920s. So if you absolutely need dice made of elephant, there you go. Yeah, don't use elephant dice. Anyway, I feel like we're kind of rambling at this point.
Well, somebody asked about dice.
They did. I'm very happy with that
Yeah.
conversation. So, is there anything else people in the chat want us to dig into before we sign off for this week? Something about Texas. Got to play those prices. Yeah, you do. Vash the Stampede. You win like 45 happy hour points, man. You can redeem them.
I don't know, somehow.
Yeah. Write your local post office to let you know. All right, I'm getting nothing from the chat. So everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. Big thanks to Rob here for helping me out with this episode, and laying out all, diving in a lot of the secrets and bad habits were all mine, and he helped out.
So let me just say this: as much work and effort that Mac has put in to develop a curriculum that we're going to run through on the show. If you guys have questions that you want answered, and you think it might take an entire show to answer those questions, please write to us and let us know what those are, because that saves us having to figure out what to do for an entire episode.
Well, actually, on that note, we do have a fully functional Discord server, which we haven't talked about at all today. Our Discord server is great. It's really, really good time to stop by and say hi, see the various things that we are talking about. We have, beyond just general RPG chat, general tabletop gaming chat, we have a whole bunch of stuff in there that talks about our shows. And I can't actually post the link in the chat because it'll destroy the way that we're doing all of our stuff here. But at the end of the show, we'll post a link in there to check out our Discord. But if you have questions, if you have an idea of a topic that you want to see us unpack a little bit, there we go. Join us on our Discord.
Yep.
If you have a couple things that, if you have ideas that you want to talk about, you want us to talk about, feel free to chime in. We have the tabletop games, or the Games Tavern Happy Hour Discord sub channel in there. Throw that in, hey, I want to know about this, and we will tackle it. We have a couple other ones that are coming up, which we're working on changing the format up a little bit. Last week, Reed and Corey did a great job at taking the helms on that, and I love that style so much. I'm going to try and turn that into how this is going in the future. So 2 smaller topics that are related to each other, so you don't have to have a whole hour and a half and change. Just if there's some good questions you have, let us know. But otherwise, let us know. Swing by our Discord server. I'm sorry, I got distracted by the cat walking by.
It's now posted in chat. For those of you who don't have it,
There
please
we
come
go.
join us. You will find that the cast and crew does engage quite often and quite vociferously if interesting subjects come up in Discord. And cast and crew are playing other games with people who are
Yeah.
not part of cast and crew on Discord. So come join us, hang out, have some fun.
Yeah, it's a fun community. So we'll go ahead and cut out here. I think this is a good enough endpoint. Again, very big thank you to Tabletop Audio, who provided our intro, outro, and mid music. You're about to hear the outro music. I believe it's the same as the mid music.
I feel bad for the audience right now because I get to see Beowulf walk back and forth because I get to see more of your screen than they do.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm sort of pinned into this spot, and the bookshelf behind me is like 7 feet away. I'm working on improving the studio and get the cat to come hang out with me. So sorry about that, guys. But otherwise, please stop by our Discord, say hi. We have a couple of those shows coming up this week. Tomorrow night is the Velkin Weave. They were off for last week, but they're going to be back. They're doing all sorts of great things. So DMC and the gang.
So excited to see what happens this week.
They've been some really interesting places. They've been doing haunted orphanages and everything else that comes out of hanging out in a haunted orphanage. It's some cool stuff.
Yeah. Cecil is so creative.
Yeah, it's got a lot of really interesting ideas coming out of there.
Yeah.
And then we're back on with Wednesday. Oh, what happened here?
No, we have rated somebody.
Okay, so I guess we're done.
Yeah.
All right. If anybody's still listening, thank you so much. Otherwise, have a good night.